Hey, what's up? It's Coach Justin from Ultimate Baseball Training. Welcome back to part 2 in this 2-part series where we're talking about the do's and don'ts of batting practice. Now, in the previous video, we talked about the don'ts, the things you want to avoid during BP, but today we're talking about the do's, the things you do want to do, the things you want to focus on in BP in order to maximize your time and really just become the best hitter you can possibly be, all right? So I really think you're gonna enjoy today's video. If you haven't seen the previous one, I'll be sure to leave a link down in the description so you can watch that one after this one. But without further ado, let's jump into the things to focus on, the do's of batting practice. So let's start things off with the very first thing you want to do in BP, and that is treat it like a game. So in other words, you have to focus and treat your batting practice time the exact same way that you're going to treat your real in-game at bats, because you've probably heard the term before, you play like you practice, right? And so if you want to play sloppy, if you want to get in the batter's box in a real game and be nervous and not be ready to go and have poor plate discipline and have poor balance and all these types of things, then practice like that. But on the flip side, obviously you don't want those things, right? If you want to play well, if you want to be confident in the batter's box, if you want to show great plate discipline, if you want to do that in a real game, then try to do that in practice. So just overall, what you need to always keep in the back of your mind is, how can I make my BP more game-like? Treat it like a game. Stick to the same routines, whatever you have to do to make it as game-like as possible. But just remember, the more game-like that you make your practice, the easier it'll be when you actually get into a real game. So that's tip number 1. Everything you do in BP, treat it like a real game. Moving on to the next thing you want to focus on, hit the ball to all fields. All right, so in other words, you never want to get one-dimensional as a hitter. You never want to, just strictly be on your pull side of the field or strictly hit everything to the opposite field. I always talk about it on this channel. The pitcher is the one who really dictates where you hit the baseball. So if he throws you a pitch over the middle of the plate, you should stay in the middle of the field. If he misses inside a little bit, well, pull your hands in, hit that ball a little bit more out in front and pull that baseball. And if he throws it away, then hit it to the opposite field, right? So you should be working on this in batting practice. You shouldn't be trying to pull everything or take everything to the opposite field. Hit it where it's pitched. If it's inside, pull it. If it's away, hit it to the opposite field. But when it's your turn to finally hit, when the guy in front of you exits the cage, you're entering the cage, you're stepping in the box, it's your turn to hit. Here's the mentality I want you to have. All right, I want you to hit to all fields. That's super important, but when you first step in the cage, the mentality I want you to have is middle of the field. Stay in the middle of the field. Think gap to gap. So from the left center gap to the right center gap, that's pretty much where you want to stay. And why do I say that? Because we just talked about you hit the ball where it's pitched. And what your BP pitcher is typically trying to do is they're trying to throw it over the plate, right? Over the middle of the plate. So if your pitcher is really good at throwing the ball right over the middle of the plate, there's no reason on a middle pitch for you to be pulling it down the line or hitting it down the opposite field line. So try to avoid the lines. Yes, if he misses in a little bit too much or misses away a little bit too much and you still are going to swing at it, yeah, it's fine to hit it down one of the lines, but you really want to avoid the extremes in BP. You want to focus on staying in the middle of the field and then adjust accordingly, and really focus on spreading the ball, spraying it all over the yard, right? Depending on what pitch location it is, because we never want to be one-dimensional as a hitter. And guys, another thing we just talked about earlier in the video, you play like you practice. So you obviously want to do whatever you're trying to accomplish in the game, you want to do that in practice. And so that leads me directly into the next tip for BP. Focus on hitting line drives, because that's what you want to do in a real game, right? You don't want to hit ground balls. You don't want to hit lazy ground balls. You don't want to hit lazy fly balls. You want to hit hard screaming line drives into the gap so you can get doubles and triples and home runs, right? That's what you want, is hard line drives. So focus on it in BP, right? Because the reality is, if you can't hit a line drive off of a stationary object like a ball on a tee, if you can't start with tee work and hit line drives, and then go to soft toss, and then go to front toss, and then go to batting practice, and if you can't square up the ball and hit hard line drives in BP, then how do you realistically expect yourself to do that in a real game with a real pitcher who's not just trying to throw the ball right over the middle of the plate, BP fastballs, but a pitcher who's actually trying to get you out. How do you expect to hit a hard line drive off of them? And so in BP, I encourage you, I know that it's easy to start thinking about hitting home runs in BP and all that good stuff. And if you occasionally hit some balls out in BP, that's great. It means you're hitting the ball hard, right? But don't just see how high and how far you can hit it, and don't start getting into a bad habit of hitting lots of fly balls, or if you get in the habit of hitting lots of ground balls, stop yourself and figure out what you're doing that's causing you to do that. Don't fall into that routine, because you really have to hit line drives in BP in order to transfer that over to the real game. If you don't do it in BP, how do you expect yourself to do it in a game? So focus on hitting line drives. Another skill you definitely want to work on in batting practice, and in my opinion, this is one of the most underrated, underworked on skills out there, and that is truly watching the ball and keeping your head down even through contact, okay? And it's one of those topics that it's so basic, it's so simple, because that's one of the first things you learn, right? Is keep your eye on the ball, right? Keep your eye on the ball, see it and hit it. It's one of the first things you learn when you first start playing this game. And so it's so common sense and so simple that players think it's too simple for them to work on, right? They'd rather talk about, and I get it, they'd rather talk about the more attractive topics, bat speed and hitting home runs and getting bigger and faster and stronger and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff is very, very important, but none of that really matters if you can't hit the ball on the sweet spot of the bat, right? And a lot of players, it's funny, they're looking to hit the ball harder and further and, more consistently and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it can come down to, well, are you truly watching the ball? Are you truly seeing it all the way till the point of contact? And are you really squaring the ball up on the sweet spot of your bat? A lot of times the answer is no. And the only way you're going to improve that in game situations, right, is if you work on that in batting practice, okay? So really, I want you to focus on, try your best to pick the ball up out of the window as early as you possibly can, and really just try your best. It's a skill you got to constantly practice, but try your best to see it really well out of the hand and watch the baseball all the way until you make contact with the ball. And then even after the point of contact, keep your head down in the hitting zone. You'll have plenty of time to look up and see where the baseball goes. But if you focus on watching the ball, you're going to be able to see the ball better in real games, and you're going to hit the ball in the sweet spot more often. And the last few things you really want to focus on in BP, these are really important, so I wanted to be sure that I cover them in today's video. One of them is reset after a bad swing. If you take a bad swing or a bad couple swings in a row where you're hitting rollover ground balls or weak little flares or weak fly balls, whatever, take just a second, a split second, and you don't have to step out of the batter's box and take 10 seconds to reset yourself. I understand that's not very practical with a team full of guys that all need to get swings in, right? But at least do something to break your rhythm and break your routine. Otherwise, if you continue to just do the same thing over and over, you're going to continue to hit those weak rollover ground balls. Something has to change, and a lot of times all you really need to do is just take a second to take a breath and reset and kind of wipe those previous swings clean and get your focus back. So after a bad swing, take a second, reset yourself after a bad swing. All right, another thing, work on execution. I understand that, in BP, you really want to swing away. You really want to focus on line drives. You really want to, hit home runs. I get all that, right? But how do you expect yourself in a real game situation when your coach, when your team needs you to execute something, when you're called upon to lay down a bunt or do a hit and run or hit a sac fly and drive in a run? When you're called upon in a real game to do that, how do you expect yourself to do it if you don't work on it in practice? So work on execution, all right? Most coaches, if you're a coach out there, make sure that you do your first round of BP, do an execution round with your team. But even if, you players out there, even if your coach doesn't require you to work on execution, which they should, but even if they don't, take it upon yourself. That first round in BP, lay down a bunt down the third base line and lay down one on the first base line, and then maybe work on a couple push bunts and drag bunts and hit and run, move them over. You can do infield in, infield back. You can work on sacrifice flies, but work on execution, because again, there's no way you're going to do it in a real game if you can't even do it in practice, right? And so work on execution. And then the last thing is work on getting your front foot down on time. You hear it all the time, get your front foot down early. I think that cue is not necessarily a great cue for a lot of hitters, because what happens when you get your front foot down early, for a lot of players, they go into their load and their stride and they develop some momentum. And then because they're told to get their front foot down early, right, they get their front foot down early and they lose all of that momentum that they just built up. So instead, BP is a great time to work on your timing, and specifically work on getting that front foot down, not early, but on time. And so what I mean by that is, so when you get that front foot down on time, you can immediately drop your front heel and progress right through your swing. That's going to help you really take your hitting to the next level. It's going to help you when a real game comes around. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss the upcoming baseball videos that we're coming out with on a weekly basis. And be sure your notifications are on. Until next time, see you later.